Our story this year is called The Meister Singers of Nuremberg. And there's one thing that makes this village unique in all of Germany, and that's that everyone loves to sing. And the king is so proud of this fact that every year he holds a singing competition, and everyone gets to compete in this singing competition. And traditionally, 2 days before that contest, he marches into the village and announces to everyone what the prize will be. One year it was gold and jewelry, and one year it was even a small palace overlooking the Rhine River. Well, I'm gonna need all of you in the audience to help me with something though, since you didn't want to be in our show. I'm gonna need you to be the citizens of Nuremberg, okay? And whenever you see the knights or your king or the princesses, you need to cheer and clap for them to show them how much you all love and respect them. So the royal knight is gonna put the horn to his lips, head knight, and he's gonna blow it to announce. Go ahead. Hold it up in the air. Good job. All right, now we're gonna march around. Come this way. All the knights are gonna march around in a circle and show off their swords and their shields, and everyone cheers. All right. Keep coming around, knights. Good job. Stop right here by the steps, and the royal palace gates open one more time, and out comes the king, followed by all his princesses. Oh, and everyone cheers, and the king puts his hands up in his air. Oh, and he puts his hands up and he says, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom of Nuremberg, I know how much you all love me, and I love you too. And for that reason, the winner of this year's singing competition will win the best prize ever. They will win the hand in marriage of one of my most beautiful princesses," and everyone applauded. But if the winner happens to be a lucky young lady, she will win the hand in marriage of one of my most handsome knights, and this time the ladies cheered. And the king said, "Oh, okay, may the best singer win." And he was about ready to go back to his palace when out from the burg came Clotilda and the Burgermeister. And they put their hand on the king's shoulder, and they said, they whispered something into his ear, and then they pointed to the Black Forest, and they pointed to the princesses. Oh, and the king's face grew horrified. He threw his hands up in the air one more time and says, "Just one more rule. There will be no dragons allowed to compete in this year's singing contest." Well, Clotilda and the Burgermeister ran back to the burg, and they gave each other high fives and danced around in little victory circles, because they knew that now that the dragon of the Black Forest was disqualified, no one had a greater singing voice than Clotilda, and she would surely win. So the king said, "I'm going back to my palace," so he did, followed by all his princesses. Excuse me, knights. Come on. The king came with all his princesses. And then he turned around to face them, and little did everyone know, but the king was crying. Oh, he cried very loudly, and he said, "Oh, princesses, I fear I have made a terrible mistake. You see, this morning I was in such a good mood that I promised that the winner of the singing contest could marry one of you. And I don't want to give any of you away because I love you all so much. So I've come up with a plan." And they dropped the king's robe, their dad's robe, and they gathered in a little closer. And the king said, "All right, this is what I want you to do. I want one of you to win the singing competition. So tonight, I want you to all go out into the meadow and practice and practice and practice until you can sing better than that Clotilda, okay?" And all the princesses said, "Yes, Papa." So that night, the king went back to his palace, and all the princesses listened. They went out into the meadow, out here to the middle of our carpet, princesses, and they spread their arms open wide, and they were just about to take a deep breath and sing their first note, when out from the Black Forest came the skunk, and he started to run around the princesses. Oh, and the princesses had never seen such a cute skunk in all their lives, so they started to chase him. Oh, and little did they know, but the dragon of the Black Forest was crouched behind a great big bush. And he said, "Oh, His Majesty doesn't want dragons to sing in the singing competition. Well, I'll get even with him." So he popped out from behind the bush and said, "You princesses!" And all the princesses screamed. walking, and they walked right over here and picked up the dragon's tail, just as if it was their father's robe. Oh, and the dragon started leading the princesses back into the Black Forest, and he said, "Oh, my pretties, I hope you like polishing treasure, because I have lots of treasure for you to polish." Oh, and all the princesses could do was nod their heads and smile, because they were so hypnotized. And they kept on going back into the Black Forest. Well, back at the palace, the king was starting to get worried. He said, "At night, sound the alarm." So he sounded the alarm. Oh, and he said, "Rush over here, knights. We have an emergency." And all the knights rushed over. Rush over, knights. This is an emergency. Over to the king. Over to the king, knights. And the king said, "Oh, knights, I haven't seen any of my princesses all day. Have you?" And they said, "No." He said, "Oh, I bet you it's that shifty Burgermeister over there in the burg. He wants his daughter Clotilda to win the singing competition so bad that he probably heard my princesses practicing so beautifully and hid them on me. So this is what I want you to do. When Clotilda comes out into the forest tonight to practice her song, I want you to sneak up on her and capture her, okay?" And the knight said, "Okay, king." So that night, sure enough, Chloe came frolicking out into the forest, ready to practice her song. When out from some great big trees came all of the knights. Go ahead, knights, sneak up on Clotilda. Go ahead, and they surrounded Clotilda, and they pointed their swords at her and said, "You're under arrest." Oh, so they took her gently by the elbows. Take her gently by the elbows. And they brought her back here to the king. And the king said, "Go to work, knights. Now I want you to lock Chloe in the highest tower you can find. And that happens to be right over here on our third step next to our trusty guardsman." And the knights came back over to the king, and they had a grand feast that night, celebrating their capture of Clotilda. Well, this time, it was the Burgermeister's turn to get worried. His daughter Clotilda had never been late. So he walked out into the forest, and he looked up, and he looked left, and he looked right. Oh, and he couldn't find Clotilda anywhere. So finally he looked down on the ground, and on the ground he saw footprints. So he followed those footprints right over here to the base of the tower. And when he looked up, what did he see? Chloe's fish waving from the top of the tower. So she threw her fish down to her father, hoping he would recognize it, and he inspected it and said, "Oh, this looks like Chloe's fish, but I'm not sure." So he took it back to the other burgers, and they sniffed it a few times and looked at it and said, "Oh, yes, this is Chloe's fish." And the Burgermeister raised his key in the air and said, "This means the king has Chloe, and this means war." So all the burgers started shaking their vegetables in the air and said, they started marching towards the palace. March towards the palace. Oh, and they stopped right about there and they said, "King, we know you've got Chloe, and we want her back." Well, the king marched right up here and he said, "Ha ha 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 ha. You're not going to get Chloe back, but this is what you will get." And the royal palace gates opened, and out from behind them came all of the knights. Oh, and thus began the Battle of the Burgers. And the knights and the burgers had a battle. Fight! Oh, well, this battle raged on all day and all night. And at one point, the swordsmen were winning, and at one point, the burgers were winning, and then no one could tell who was winning. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the best swordsman in all of Germany, fighting against the best vegetable fighters in all of Germany. Oh, well, the burgers realized there was a problem. They looked at their vegetables, and they were starting to get mushy. Oh, so the Burgermeister had to think of a quick trick. So he pointed up in the sky and said, "Knights, look, fly and dragon attack." And while the knights were looking up, the burgers bopped the knights in the head, and they all fell down to the ground. Out cold, knights, fall to the ground. Fall, knights. Ladies and gentlemen, the burgers had been victorious. And they danced around in little victory circles and gave each other high fives. moment, something began. It was the worst earthquake in all of Nuremberg history. And the knights bounced back up to their feet, and the burghers started bouncing up and down, and everybody bounced to this side of the kingdom, and the king bounced to this side of the kingdom. Knights, bounce this way! Go! And Clotilda bounced out of her tower back to her father, the Burgermeister. King, you bounce all the way to this side. And then out from the Black Forest, with all his princesses following, came the very cause of this earthquake, the dragon. And the dragon came right about here and let out a great big roar! Oh, and everyone screamed! Oh, but not the king! The king wasn't scared of that dragon. He marched right up to him and said, "Oh, dragon, I see that you have my princesses carrying your tail. My princess is carrying your tail. What's the meaning of this?" And the dragon politely bowed to the king. And he said, "Your Majesty, I happen to know that this morning you banned dragons from singing in your singing competition. Well, I happen to be a dragon who loves to sing. So I'll make you a deal. If you let me sing tonight, I'll unhypnotize your princesses." Well, the king had to think about this one. He scratched his head and he scratched his chin. Oh, and he knew he had thousands of people waiting for him. And the singing contest started in just 5 minutes. And he said, "All right, dragon, if you unhypnotize my princesses, I'll let you sing." So the dragon turned around and winked. And the princesses were unhypnotized. And they kept right on carrying that dragon's tail because they had grown very fond of him. Well, the king grew insanely jealous. He said, "Who will carry my robe?" And all the burghers said, "We will carry your robe." So they came over here, and for the first time in Nuremberg history, the burghers had the honor of carrying the king's train. And the king put his hands in the air and said, "Follow me to the singing competition." And the king that day processed to the singing competition, followed by the burghers and the knights, followed by the dragon and all his princesses. And what did everyone do when they saw their king? Oh, it was a grand procession, right around in a circle. And the king came to right about there, and he said, "All right, everybody, have a seat, right where you are." And the king took off his crown and said, "I want everyone to write your name on a piece of paper, and I will come around to collect it in my crown." So he went around and collected the name of every burgher, burger girl, knight, dragon, princess, and even that skunk, because he had a great singing voice too. Oh, and everyone in the entire village sang that day, some very beautifully and some not so beautifully, until there were only 2 names left in the king's crown. And he came up here to the middle and pulled out the second to last name and read it and said, "Clotilda." So Clotilda came to the middle. She curtsied to the king, cleared her throat, faced her audience, spread her arms out wide. And this is what Clotilda sounded like. Oh. But at that very moment, Clotilda's fish began to wiggle in her hands. And whoo, it slipped right out of her hands. And Clotilda stopped singing. And she picked up her fish and went and knelt before the king and said, "Oh, king, my fish, it slipped." The king said, "Your what?" And he took it from her. And she said, "My fish, I can't sing without it, king." And he said, "Oh, Clotilda, I don't believe you." But then, whoo, it slipped right out of the king's hands. Oh, and the king said, "All right, Clotilda, you can have one more chance." So she got her fish back from the king. And Clotilda opened her arms one more time. And she sang even more beautifully than the first time. But it was the skunk who got up. Oh, and he knew that this was the girl that tried to get his friend the dragon disqualified. And he shook his tail in front of Clotilda's face and did what only skunks can do. Oh. And everybody pitched their nose, and Clotilda ran out from the circle. And the king said, "Oh, good, better luck next year, Clotilda. Skunk, go sit down." And he knew there was one more name in his crown, so he pulled it out and read, Oh, the dragon. So the dragon stood up, careful not to knock out any of the princesses with his tail, and came to the front. And then on his way up to the front, everyone started to laugh at the dragon. Oh, because he was such a pathetic looking dragon. But he didn't care what everyone thought. He opened his arms, and this is what the dragon sounded like. Oh, no one could believe that such a beautiful song could come out of such an ugly dragon. Oh, everyone started to dab at their eyes. They pulled handkerchiefs out and their mouths open and they gasped. But the king slapped his hand to his forehead and said, "Oh, if this dragon wins the singing competition, he'll get to marry one of my princesses. How embarrassing." But at that very moment, there was a unicorn awoken in the forest, and she woke up to hear what was singing so beautifully. And when she saw that it was just a pitiful old dragon, she took pity on him and touched him on his head and touched him on his tail. And off came his head and off came his tail. And there, singing away before the whole village of Nuremberg, was the most handsome prince anyone had ever seen. And everyone cheered. Oh, but the king said, "Quiet, quiet, quiet. I will be the judge of this singing competition." And he took off his crown one more time, this time to pull out the winner's name. And he reached in very, very deep and pulled out a golden slip of paper and read, "The winner of this year's singing competition will be